Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Joe Gould. I'm here with Adam Old Man Winters, and we got another Frankenstein movie today.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, if it was done by low budget British horror film or horror company, Hammer Films. But before we get to that, you said it's National Burger Day?
Yeah, it's what the internet says. A lot of so we're recording on what is this, May the 28th?
May the
A lot of
28th. Our audience will probably hear it in around July 4th.
I cooked 2 hamburgers for myself yesterday on a George Foreman, but today there's a lot of chain restaurants doing different deals. Some of them, you get a free burger if you buy something else. Some of them, they just have discounts. But instead of doing that, here I am recording with you, set out burger hunting.
Well, sometimes instead of burger hunting, you gotta watch movies with burgermeisters.
Indeed, and this has a lot of stuff on the chopping block. A lot of meat goes under the knife in this movie.
That is true. And if you're gonna go into a restaurant, you want to be served a burger by a creepy monster or a pretty lady. So it's a perfect.
Who might be a monster inside?
Who might be? Who might be? So we've watched Frankenstein Created Woman, or as the TV spot said, Frankenstein Created Woman.
Oh, you watched the promo for?
Absolutely. So I'm not sure how many ways there are to watch this movie, but I have the Shout from the Shout Factory and their Scream division of the Blu-ray. And this is most of the Hammer Film stuff I've been watching on like 8-packs or 6-packs or stuff like that. This is a standalone disc. Cost me a little bit more, but it's got some really nice special features on this. And I'm assuming you have something similar, right?
I have the old Anchor Bay DVD. Not sure what year it came out, but it has much less in the way of special features, I expect. It does have some trailer and TV spots. It has a little 25-minute, I wouldn't call it a documentary. It's more of an extended clip show promo for the Frankenstein Hammer series.
Okay. Yeah, so on my Blu-ray, which I recommend if that's the extent of your stuff, it's got an audio commentary by some film historians, which I heard is very good, but I did not watch because I didn't watch the film all the way through twice. That's my point.
Shame.
But it had some commentary by some actors. Well, actors is a strong word, but they did have a interview with Robert Morris, who plays Hans. Hans number 3, I guess, at this point.
They've changed his last name. I don't know if you noticed that. He's got a new last name this time.
Well, I never paid attention to his other last names.
Well,
it's got 2.
It was funny. It was funny because it was Cleve, and he said it was Cleaver, and I thought it was a pun. But the surname Cleve, has now been attached to the female lead and her father. That's an interesting tidbit.
Okay, I guess it was spelled with a K based off that box.
Yeah.
It also has 2 World of Hammer episodes, one of which is The Curse of Frankenstein, which that may have been what you were mentioning. I did not watch that.
I'm let down by that. Yeah, I saw it. I was let down.
It was supposed to cover all the Frankenstein movies, and there was clips, but the audio was so poor because the narrator, I couldn't hear him over the music. So I don't know if that's a Blu-ray problem or this is what they got to work with problem.
Yeah, I didn't think it was especially bad, but they left out Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed on my cut of this, interestingly enough.
Well, I only watched about 2 minutes of it because I could tell very quickly I couldn't hear it. And I didn't want to mess with trying to figure out.
It's just a clip show montage, really. It's like an extended promo.
It does make me interested in the World of Hammer series. I will say that.
Yeah.
But I doubt, based on the version that I just watched, I'm doubting there's very good quality of those floating around. Mine also has a Hammer Glamour documentary, which... So it's basically looking at Hammer films and their use of pretty girls.
Oh, they do a good job with that.
So I skimmed it. Nothing in the documentary, I don't believe, had anything to do with the Frankenstein series. So I skimmed it to see if there was anything specifically tied to that. and there wasn't. A couple of Peter Cushing references from his other films. I will say, don't watch that one with the kids in the room. A few spots there, but which a lot of Hammer films you can't watch with the kids in the room. Though the Frankenstein movies, I don't up to this point.
Maybe not the next one.
Fair game.
Yeah,
haven't seen it yet. Don't know. And then it's got a bunch of theatrical trailers, TV spots, and kind of interesting still galleries. I feel like maybe it's just because I got the special edition of the DVD or the Blu-ray, but this movie seems much better preserved than some of the other films in terms of being able to find information on it.
It's ironic that it feels like this is more scarce in America, though, compared to the other ones.
Yeah. Also, it's probably the case that just more of these people are alive that have worked on this film. So it's easier for them when they're releasing them to get some actual firsthand experience with it.
So this is 1967, and I read online it was released in America by 20th Century Fox, but when I watched my DVD, I don't think I saw any branding from 20th Century Fox. Makes me wonder if I got the British cut on this DVD.
I'm not sure, and I can't recall on the actual film, though on quite a few of the special features, I did see 20th Century Fox. I will say, so mine also had like every movie poster, every like visual promotional card, like all the very cool stuff on the background or on the stuff to see. It is also interesting that they took a lot of promotional shots which are nowhere in this movie.
I noticed that on the back was Frankenstein carrying Christina, and she's in a two-piece, but I don't think that appears at all in the movie.
Yeah, so Susan Denberg, just a year prior, maybe not even a full year, was a Playboy Playmate of the Month.
Oh!
And you can tell that they took a lot of promotional pictures highlighting her recent celebrity, we shall say. That's what got her this role. So I won't. You don't have to speak, Adam. I don't want you to get in trouble with your job. So
yeah, fair enough. But she doesn't dress like that so much in the movie, though.
Not at all. No, they took a lot of pictures, I think, to promote the film. There's one, especially, I'm not sure what the right word for it would be. One picture in particular has Cushing with his hand underneath some of the garments, so to speak, looking at the camera. So they're definitely going with the sex sells motif, but they don't necessarily have very much of that in the movie. So again, mostly a family-friendly movie from today's standards, but the promotional material not so much. You know what I mean?
Family-friendly, like if your kids watch guillotines and severed heads talking to people with potentially demonic messages. Fun for the whole family.
You know, I grew up on Child's Play and Friday the 13th. I was watching those at a very young age. So, I mean, this would have been something I could have watched when I was 5.
I have seen the first Friday the 13th, and I got a lot of those vibes later in the movie with the mother, whose, I guess, hands is filling in for Jason's mother here.
Yeah. But anyways, if your kids watch horror movies and you're not uncomfortable watching fake heads being cut off, the language is not bad. There's no actual nudity or anything, so it's actually, if you're watching the Hammer films with your children, the Frankenstein series up to this point seems to be pretty much fair game. Just keep them away from some of the special features.
A lot of cutaways in this movie.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of cutaways. And also, I don't know if you picked up on this, but Susan Denberg, she got redubbed. It's not her voice.
The whole movie?
All of it. I sensed something was off, and I was reading about it. So she's Austrian, and her accent was too thick, so they decided to get someone to redub her. I don't think I have the name in front of me in terms of who did that. But yeah. But they said that she did a great job, very earnest in her portrayal, and they weren't criticizing her acting ability. It was more along the lines of just it was too thick of an accent. And obviously she was not hired for her voice. So
come to think of it, I don't think, well, of the Frankenstein movies we've watched so far, I believe this is the first one where they never tell you anything about the geography they're in.
I think so, yeah. I think you're right. Before we get into the movie, I have to tell you, I had an eBay fail. I was trying to be cute, and it didn't work out. I mean, it did if you look at it one way. So I got a recent King Kong Escapes poster, and it says, what is it? King Kong Frankenstein's Son. It's like a German release, so it's one of those posters where the words have nothing to, or the title have nothing to do with the film. So I found a really cool poster, and I think it's German as well. Let me see here. It is, and it's got a picture of it's Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but it's the German one. So you got this really cool picture of Mechagodzilla and Godzilla on there, and the text on it is King Kong gegen Godzilla.
Mm.
And they're
Germany's
posted
so
for
weird.
$60. Yeah, I know. It's all the German posters. I don't understand it. It's all the German posters. But anyways, they were offering for 60, but they were taking offers, and they sent me an offer for 45. So I ain't spending $45 on that. But it was like an A- grade poster, so I offered 30.
Yeah.
They took it. So,
but was it
I can't
original?
complain. Yeah, it's original.
Okay.
Only originals for me. I don't buy only originals. But anyways, I got a new poster coming.
You said there was a fail. Where was the fail?
I didn't mean to buy it. I made the offer thinking they're never going to take it, and they actually took my offer.
That's a little unusual. I don't think I've ever
done that. I gave them a half-off offer. I usually lowball them and then see what I can get them to. I lowballed in this case, and they took it. So it makes me think.
Well, that's the best case scenario,
that the economy
then, right?
is down. Yeah, but I've spent way too much money on posters and frames the last month. I needed to take a few weeks off.
Hey, I understand that, but again, it was a little. So what you were trying to do, you were sending an offer, assuming they wouldn't take it, but maybe hoping that next month you would get something similar. Is that what you were thinking?
I was more trolling. I was just sending an offer. I knew they weren't going to sell the poster, so go ahead.
What kind of arguments you get into with people on Twitter? You trolling off such? Trolling on eBay, trolling on Twitter.
I wasn't trolling. Not the right word. I was just doing an intentional lowball offer with no expectation of getting it, and now I'm thinking, man, I could have gotten more aggressive on that.
Now, I've probably done
Twitter's
that
all about
with
the pro
bids
wrestling
before, but I've never done an offer without intending to go ahead with it. I have been surprised sometimes on bids.
I've never had anyone accept a 50% offer.
They were dealing.
So when they offered 25% off, I'm thinking, well, I'll just see if they'll take 50. Not really. And again, I fully did not expect them to take it. I mean, it was more just like getting the feel for that person. But
yeah,
I don't know.
So
Frankenstein Created Woman.
Not the father of King Kong, but Baron Frankenstein, Victor.
Yes. So the tagline was "A beautiful woman with the soul of the devil,"
which is an odd interpretation, considering what Frankenstein proposes about his newest theory in this movie.
Yeah, I think they made the tagline. I don't know if they had the whole film ready, because that tagline is on all the promotional photos of the things we mentioned before, none of which are in the movie. Where you got this scantily clad female that looks like she's just been created. There's one picture where she's in the machine from the previous movie, standing up, which didn't happen in this movie. And so they're acting as if he created this body in these promotional things. In reality, nope. This is very TV movie. This is very. So I think we've made the analogy before that a lot of these Peter Cushing films would have made a great series, a la The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this movie would kind of like be one of the made-for-TV movies that the Hulk had later on. About 10 years after the show went off the air. This is
fair enough.
The Daredevil movie or whatever. This is the
Columbo
the trial
did that too. Yeah.
Yes, this is the trial of Frankenstein, that you might call it. But I don't know. It definitely had a TV movie budget and atmosphere to it. But there is a kernel of truth in the tagline. I will say that.
So we should describe Victor Frankenstein's newest scientific theory that he's very confident in, to the point where he's going to risk his own life a few times to prove it.
Why don't you expound first, and I'll give you my thoughts. I found his theory very confusing in this movie, so I'm curious to see your take on it.
So when we're first introduced to this version of Victor, Hans, not the same Hans as we've seen in either of the previous movies, he's teamed up with a new doctor, Dr. Hertz, and they have a little laboratory, which feels a lot more spacious than it should be. It's just kind of crammed into a building in town, and they pull a frozen coffin out, and they open it up, and in lies a frozen Dr. Frankenstein with his hands covering his face. And my first thought was, oh, they're trying to do a loose sequel to Evil of Frankenstein. They've recovered his body from the ice, and they've brought him here.
Ha! Nope. Not at all.
Yeah, he's unfrozen. Well, they don't really take a lot of time to unfreeze him, but Dr. Hertz is watching the stopwatch. And as soon as it reaches exactly 1 hour, and it just so happens that Hans shows up at 1 minute before it's time to pull him out of the deep freeze, and he's necessary to help Dr. Hertz get him out of the little coffin. And they give him a few electric shocks, and he gets a heartbeat again. And he wakes up pretty fine. Like, he does a lot better than Han Solo did in Return of the Jedi, even though he'd been frozen for more than 1 hour. And Frankenstein concludes that he had been dead 1 hour. Now he's alive again, and his soul never left his body. Aha! Like it's a big deal. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not quite as confident in his conclusion of temporarily deep freezing somebody is the equivalent of actual dying.
Yeah. So I guess before we get into that, I want to mention one thing where the movie opens, because I don't think we'll come back to it. And that is, so the movie opens with the death of Hans's father, who's a crook, killer, and just generally bad guy. And young Hans comes up right when they're about to kill him, and ultimately sees his father beheaded, and they make eye contact. And then they go to the time jump, and you have a older guillotine, which I think is used later, so they must have refurbished it. But anyways, they have the guillotine, and Hans is looking at it, and he's wearing the exact same clothes that he wore as a little 10-year-old boy.
He just unrolled
even
them.
down to even down to the scarf around his neck. And then apparently that's when he realizes that he's on the clock, and he runs back to his place of employment and gets there just in time. He says, "Sorry, I'm late." So just that plot point is important later, and I don't think we'll come back to this part. So, but yeah, he goes in, and then his whole soul thing. I feel like this was I applaud Peter Cushing for doing what he did with what he was given. That's all I can say.
Now, both he and Christopher Lee were critical at times of the writing they had to deal with in their Hammer careers.
So this is a little bit later, and his lackey is talking to Frankenstein. Frankenstein offers to explain everything to his jumbled little mind. He says, "Please, and thank you." And he basically, the points that he's proving is that, one, the soul doesn't leave the body at the instant of death, which is what he proved when he froze himself for the hour. And then he, in a later experiment, says he succeeded in a frame of force that nothing can penetrate or leave, which is this contraption that he uses to capture a soul.
Well, do you remember how he tested it? Do you remember how he tested that?
Well, with jumper cables and a tuning fork.
No, he had a wine glass, and he shot at it with a revolver. And he said because the glass did not break when the bullet hit it, therefore it was indestructible and nothing could pass through it. That seemed to be the conclusion.
So it seems to be that he's created an incubation chamber that can get into anything if it wants to, but also nothing can leave it if you get something inside of it. I don't know how you
Like
get
he
something
wants it
inside
both
of it.
ways. Yeah, he wants it both. I
I'm
guess
not
he
sure how you get it
channeled.
inside of it. Ultimately, he says one dies because the body dies, not the soul. If you can transfer the soul and repair the damaged body, then I have conquered death. But ultimately, it seems to be a little Ghostbustery, where he's got this device that can suck a soul out of you, and it will hold it, and then you can put it in reverse and put the soul back into whatever thing you just fixed. That seems to be the gist of it. Ghostbusters,
Huh.
1967.
And even then, I feel like there's some plot holes. We'd tire ourselves out talking about the plot holes, but that's the gist of the movie. The idea that you can harvest a soul from a body that hasn't been dead very long. You could hold it theoretically indefinitely because it's nothing is able to escape or penetrate the super hard glass field that he's created. I feel like we should say something of that little home mining equipment that he has where he sticks the 3 rods into a rock wall and he's able
I'm
to
not
channel
entirely
the
sure what was
energy.
going on there. Yeah, I didn't quite follow it, other than it being a neat visual. I just feel
Somehow
like
it's
this
how
whole
he.
thing about Soul should have involved much more vacuum cleaners and less electricity.
Eh, man. But it works for this movie. He is able to harvest a soul and he's able to transfer it.
And this is not really spelled out, but under the whole movie, when I'm watching it, I am under the impression that his goal is to replace the soul and not to make a dual personality. Did that
That,
confuse you some?
well, it makes you wonder why didn't he remove the soul from Christina and put it in the spare containment unit so he could put the soul from Hans into Christina's body. It really makes you wonder how can there be 2 souls in one body, and Dr. Frankenstein even has a line of dialogue fairly late in the movie where he says Hans's soul is in Christina but not all the time or something like that. Oh,
Yeah,
huh. Well,
yeah.
where
So
does it
let's. I'm gonna.
go when it's not in Christina?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do a little speed plot just in case people are listening but they didn't watch it. So after they bring Frankenstein back to life, his servant, his hands, so to speak. In this movie, Frankenstein's hands are scarred up. It's like the one thing they carried over from previous film. But
I don't remember how that happened though when he got the hand
well,
scars.
the castle caught on fire.
Oh, oh, we're going
Anyways, they
back
don't
to
really
evil
explain it. I
Frank.
don't know that it's yeah, I don't know it's actually supposed to be a connection, but you could make it one if you tried hard enough. But that's their plot point to why he has to have a little serving guy
He has
whose
no
name I keep
grip,
forgetting.
and
Dr. Hertz.
Dr. Hertz. Dr. Hertz is
Yeah.
the. He loves his brandy, Dr. Hertz.
Yes. Dr. Hertz loves two things: alcohol and Baron Frankenstein. And when Frankenstein is at risk, he gets real nervous and drinks even more. Though he seems to have fixed his drinking problem in the second half of the film. Very lucid from one point on. But anyways,
He gains a
so they
daughter,
bring
so to speak.
yeah. So Frankenstein comes back to life. They send Hans down to a local inn or cafe or whatever for some champagne to celebrate his return. He gives him a coat because it's cold. Now, this place where he goes, Christina works there, who is basically the left side of her body is all kind of messed up. Got scars on her face, almost like a burn victim, though it's probably more like a birthmark. And then you got like her left hand doesn't work right, her left leg doesn't work right, so she's generally disabled. So her
But
father
still
is
attractive,
a
in my opinion. It's like they give her a hard time in this movie.
she was a model, so makeup and all. But anyway, she goes down there. Her father doesn't like him. They get in a little argument. But then three, as we call them, dandies come in. So three pretty boys come in,
Ugh, the
and
terrible trio.
they mock the girl. And ultimately, they get into a big fight. And Hans cuts one of them. Handles himself pretty well. Ultimately, the cops come. No charges are pressed. But they all leave. But the three dandies stay. And then Baron Frankenstein and Hertz come back and they stitch him up. So while that's
For a
wrapping
small
up,
fee.
yeah, for a small fee which
5 crowns.
they use to pay for their dinner.
Oh, What a racket.
So then Hans, we see him, and he's knocking on the window of Christina, and she lets him in, and ultimately, they have a good time. And then while that's going on, the lackeys, well, the next day I should say, the lackeys come through, lock
Dandies.
Christina a little bit via the window. The dandies, yeah, sorry, the dandies, and they kind of make fun of Christina not from outside their place, so they realize they want to go drink some more. So then they break into the cafe inn thing, whatever it is. But then the father comes back while they're drinking, and they beat him to death. And ultimately, though, they find the jacket that Hans had been given by Hertz. So
Well,
the
the police
police
do.
suspect
Yeah.
him. Yeah. So the police suspect Hans of the murder. He gets arrested. You get a trial.
It ain't much of a trial.
Frankenstein is not a very good testimony person.
Well, that may be by intent, too. You see a little bit of change in his demeanor at one point when the judge presents an opportunity to him.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he meant, though. So he says he finds it extremely unlikely that he could commit such a crime. But then they ask him, would it be impossible? He says, well, not impossible. And then
That's when I
but the
think the
main thing
wheels
is,
are turning in his devious mind.
possibly, possibly. But Hans, he could get out of this whole situation if he would just let them know where he was. But he doesn't want to involve Christina, which is who he was with. So he ultimately is found guilty, and he's murdered at the guillotine.
Well,
But
he's
right before he
executed, but
dies,
yeah.
yeah, executed. But right before he dies, Christina comes back in her carriage, and they make eye contact, and she sees his head chopped off. And then she's so distraught that she commits suicide by jumping in the river.
It should be noted that the reason she had gone away was to see doctors, and there is a line of dialogue when she talks about her father spends all the money he makes, either in landlord work or in his restaurant liquor business, paying for her to see different doctors, none of whom can really do anything for her partial paralysis or her facial deformities. So that's where she was going after she spent the night with Hans. And it just so
Yeah.
happens when she's coming back, she's riding with some lady. We don't know who the lady is. And the lady says, "Oh, they're about to execute someone. Come on, let's hurry. We don't want to miss it." the, the history of public execution was always, I mean, yeah, you have people watching, but everybody recognized it's a gruesome thing. And it's been a long history of trying to create more quote unquote humane ways to execute people, which actually led to the invention of the electric chair because they thought that would be much less gruesome and painless way than the old guillotine and the hanging and everything else. But it's just kind of odd how happy the civilized lady is to go watch the guillotine fall. I
Yeah.
don't know. Now, the other thing
So
I guess was if you think about Hans's father, nobody was there to witness that, but everybody comes out to watch Hans get executed, and yet they can have this whole trial and execution before they even inform the next of kin of the murder victim, Mr. Cleve. No word gets to the daughter. They don't even wait. It seems like that would have been relevant for the trial to call the next of kin in.
well, I will say we're not sure how long she's been out of town. We're not sure what year this is set.
Eh,
There's no phones, so yeah, maybe legitimate. Yeah, I don't know.
they could send
So
a carrier pigeon.
so right once the verdict is in, Frankenstein tells Hertz that they're gonna steal Hans's body so they can get his soul.
Oh,
So
no, no,
he
no,
sends
not steal. Arrange for it.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So you got to
Well,
make an
you're right.
arrangement.
Yes.
Demand
Yeah.
it.
So Hertz has that mission, and then he succeeds. There's a interesting little scene where he goes to the jail. Now, you think he's going to interact with Hans for a minute, but he actually doesn't actually do that. He just talks to the jailkeeper, but he blackmails him basically off his prior discretions. And
Mm.
ultimately, they deliver the body within the hour of his death, and they put him up to the soul sucking machine, and the soul apparently resembles the light from a flashlight. That's what we see once it's put into the box.
I was a little curious if they had included the head when they did the soul sucking machine. Because where do you think the soul came out of? Did it come from the heart, the belly, the brain? All the talk about
Yeah,
brain being life in previous movies.
no, it's an interesting thing. It's unclear whether or not they have possession of the head at this point. But his head
Mm.
is not on the table, and I can confirm that via the interview with Robert Morris, who played Hans, and they had cut a hole at the back of the table. So he laid on the table what appeared to be a very uncomfortable position, where his head was pushed back, and they were able to put the basically a sheet over his face, so it was his body and not a stuffed body double.
Hmm.
But yeah, so the soul is sucked out of the headless body, which is interesting. It does make you wonder back, not just 1967, but also back in the time frame, back whenever this was allegedly taking place, as to where did they consider the soul? And my gut says they probably thought of the heart. So ironically, the previous Frankenstein films involved the brain.
The brain is life. That's the big deal.
Yeah. So I don't know, but yeah, it is interesting. It does not seem to involve the head.
So yeah,
So
they
as
they
they're
harvest the hand soul, and as soon as they're done with Hans's body, Christina's body shows up. Man, what timing!
yeah, it freaks Hertz out pretty good. But Frankenstein is undeterred, and he says, "Let's get to work. We got a soul. We got a body. Let's
Now
put the
I
vacuum
like
cleaner in reverse and send the soul in."
I like the visitors, the good Samaritans who pull Christina's body out of the drink. They go to Dr. Hertz and they say, "Is there anything you can do for her?" Like, okay, what were they expecting here? Um,
You know, not real smart peasants. What can you say?
it's definitely not the constables or anything because they it makes you wonder where Christina's father was buried at.
Yeah.
She never mourned her father. It's very unfortunate in this movie. It just she does suicide right after she sees Hans. I want to point out briefly before I forget,
Is
Dr.
she even? Let
Frankenstein
me.
claims to be a doctor of medicine, of what's the middle one? But he physics and law, and then he immediately claims to be a psychologist. So,
Yeah, one and the
and
same.
they accuse him of being a doctor of witchcraft, and he says, "I'm not aware they gave out doctors for that, but I would likely qualify if they did."
Did she ever figure out that her father was killed?
It's not no, it they just execute
Yeah, I guess she
Hans,
never.
and the next thing you know, she runs and jumps in the river. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah, she doesn't even know what he's in charge with.
Mm. No one mourns Mr. Cleve.
Nope. So they successfully put the soul in her body, and they spend what they say months. They say fixing her appearance. So
6 months.
6 months. So she's got all her scars are gone. Her arms and legs work properly and look right. She's got new hair color. I'm not really sure why on that.
Yeah. So there's a
And
callback to the second
yeah,
movie when Frankenstein remarks that her paralysis is likely due to a blood clot, which is what he said about Carl in Revenge of
oh yeah,
Frankenstein. And it's a bit of a missed opportunity for all the dead characters here because Frankenstein and Dr. Hertz, they want to eat and they want to drink. And Mr. Cleve wants his daughter to get medical attention to fix her deformities. And all the dandies make fun of her because of the deformities. And if they had just worked out an agreement to let Dr. Hertz and Frankenstein eat at the restaurant, they likely could have fixed all Christina's problems, and then you wouldn't have it. Nobody would be dead. Not at least not from the immediate reasons that everybody's dead from that they are in this movie.
no, it is true. It also makes you wonder how they funded all this. They were obviously pretty broke at
Mm.
the beginning.
Well, Dr. Hertz
But yeah,
clearly has some contracts when it comes to, you know, somebody needs something, they're going to Dr. Hertz. And
yeah,
he doesn't have much
that's
of a
true.
brain, but Frankenstein tells him what to do, and he's got good enough hands that he can still do it.
Yeah,
And a hands, if they need an extra hand.
and a cleaver. But
And a cleave. Yeah, cleave. A
cleave, yeah.
cleaver. The cleaver. But they always say
So,
cleaver, I think.
so she wakes up, and I think they tell her her name, but not who she really is. She keeps asking, "But who am I? But who am I?"
In that dubbed over voice.
And yeah, and I feel like they skip a few plot points here in terms of establishing this, but for some reason they feel the need to do an experiment to like maybe see whose soul's really in charge. Like maybe Frankenstein has an idea that it's like a dual thing going on, but it's a little unclear. Like it's very odd and hard to follow at this point. But they take her blindfolded to the guillotine, and they tell her just to tell us the first thing that comes to mind. And they take her, they uncover her eyes, and she sees the guillotine, and she remembers, or he remembers, his father being executed. Screams out, "Papa, Papa!" and passes out of shock. And so we see that his soul is in her body, but as you mentioned before, as Frankenstein says, not all the time.
Ugh. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little unclear what what Frankenstein expected versus what he got. But it's like, man, I'm an idiot. I forgot to take the old soul out. It's just like,
We've always been there. Forget to remove the old soul so you can put a new one in.
yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the equivalent of, you forgot to when you're doing a load of laundry, but you forgot to put the detergent in. It's just like
Yeah.
basic step here.
Hmm.
But again, it's a little unclear. And even then, I don't know if I had put two and two together of what they really were going to go at here. Like I expected a much different kind of psychological horror film than what we got.
Oh, we definitely get into horror film territory in the last 30 minutes of this, despite Peter Cushing's argument these type of movies are not horror movies.
Yes. Yes. She's in shock. Frankenstein wants to do more experiments. Hertz says, just give her time to wake up. He definitely views the body as a her. Frankenstein seems to view more of the him, thinking of the soul. So she wakes up though, and we see that well, we don't immediately see, but we ultimately find out she's now being controlled by the vengeful Hans.
The Revenge of Hans.
Yeah. So Hans gets himself dressed up in nice pretty clothes.
Where'd he get those from?
And then the basket or the I don't know, actually. I don't think she would have dressed like that.
Maybe Dr. Hertz bought her
Well,
a
no,
wardrobe.
I think Dr. Hertz had bought her a new wardrobe because remember he tried to take
Right.
her out one time and Frankenstein says
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
and then immediately after he said he wanted to take her out for the experiment.
Right.
But anyway, so he uses Christina's new good looks to seduce one by one the three dandies, and
Anton,
ultimately,
Johann, Carl. I
yeah,
wanted him dead early in the movie. It's a little bit shame we had to wait so long.
I feel like Carl needs a different name. This is too plain. But so one
Call
gets
back to
killed
Revenge.
at her. Yeah, so I'll just real quick summary, and then we can discuss details if we want. But she kills one at her old house. Unclear exact means of death. Then she kills one with an axe at the end, chops his head off.
Yeah.
And then she kills
Leaves
one on a
a
picnic
marker
with a knife. Yeah, so it's
that
at the
one's
second
brutal.
one where she writes Hans's name in blood, and that's where all the townspeople believe that Hans has come back to life, and that's when they go accuse Frankenstein of witchcraft. And he's like, he actually tells them what he did, and they don't seem too upset for what it's worth. It's kind of weird, but and they say they'll clean up his mess, but he runs away on a horse. But anyways,
It's a shame we didn't get to watch him against a blue screen again like we did in the last movie.
Yeah. And it's at this point, I think after the second one, after the second one, we find out that that Friday the 13th ripped off this movie.
Kill
She
Christina.
has At some point, Christina has gone and dug up Hans's body, or not. I'm sorry, dug up the grave and stolen his head and put it on a bedpost in her room, and she has conversations with it, or he has conversations with it. A little unclear there.
I wasn't entirely sure if every time we hear Hans's voice, if it's supposed to be the voice or if it's just in her head, but all the dandy victims, they seem to hear the voice of Hans as well.
No, I think that they make the impression that he is able to speak with his voice out of her body when he wants, and then they also give the impression that she hears his voice in her head also.
They want it both ways,
but her mouth ain't moving.
Yeah, they get it both ways.
Also, it was really odd. I got confused at the last scene. I thought that she had cut his head off, the third victim, but in reality, she had just left. She had brought Hans's head in a picnic basket and just left it on the ground by the victim.
Yeah, that was unclear for me too. I didn't know if it was a censorship thing, like how much they could go in focus with that, or for how long they could do it.
Yeah, I think they cleared it up a little bit because they went back to when Frankenstein found the body. There was one more picture where you could see what had actually happened with the stabbing part. But yeah, it was it threw me off, a little confusing. Nice effect, I will say that, but
yeah,
kind of confusing. His head held up pretty well to be decomposed for about 6 months or whatever.
Mummified, perhaps. Yeah, a lot of these bodies hold up pretty well, though not having the blood flowing in these movies.
So then the movie ends with, after the final murder, Frankenstein gets there. Hans tells Christina that her job is done and she can rest now. And he seems to leave of some sort. I don't really exactly get that. And then she, basically tells Frankenstein that, I have nothing left to live for, or something the equivalent of that. And he watches her commit suicide again by jumping in the river. By the same way twice.
It is an interesting point. I'd like to observe that there are several scenes in this movie that have 6 people in them. The 3 dandies, Hans, Christina, and Mr. Cleve. And they're all dead in different ways by the end of the movie. It's a tragedy, all these dead bodies one after another.
Yeah, and then we have the movie ends with Frankenstein looking very, very sad. He looks almost like he's sorry for the first time in all the films we've seen. He just walks away kind of sulking. And
Curse is foiled again.
Interesting movie. Not what I expected. Probably because of the promotional material.
Yeah, the whole soul of the devil bit. They establish in this movie that Hans has childhood trauma and he has a temper that can lead him into violence. Even though most of the time his temper is set off by when he sees other people suffering. But I feel like it's a little bit unfair to call him the soul of the devil, if that's what's really going on here.
Yeah, he did foreshadow his death. When he was with Christina in her room, he says, "Anger will get me hanged one day."
Ah, not quite.
Yeah, not quite hanged, but pretty close.
We get another foreshadowing of deaths I wasn't aware of. It's when Anton is playing cards with his dandies, and he turns up the ace of spades when he's trying to do a card trick, which I had to look that up. Apparently that's a harbinger of deaths or ill fortune.
Okay, yeah, I meant to look that up because I recognized that he was freaked out, but I couldn't come up with any good reason why.
I don't play enough cards, I guess, to be creeped out. I question whether
anyone in 1967 would have got that reference, but who knows? From the interview with Robert Morris, there's a couple of little interesting things I had written down. So this was his first film. says the director was great, which I think this is the same director as the first movie, right? The first Frankenstein?
Terrence Fisher. I think he was gone for
Yeah.
Evil of Frankenstein. They let the cameraman direct the last one, which is probably why it looked so good, spectacle, but didn't
Also
care
why it
about
was
continuity.
not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he says the director was pretty good. He gave him little hints and things on technique, like facial expressions. I noticed that modern day, or whenever they interviewed Robert Morris, he has the same haircut as he did back then.
That's unfortunate. Those British people.
He was scared to death of the bedroom scene.
Yeah.
Because he was in bed with a girl without a shirt.
A Playboy bunny,
apparently,
or a
yeah,
playmate,
they put
I
his
guess.
arm in a very specific. They put his arm in a very specific place to keep the censors at bay. So they said the entire scene he was just nervous because he couldn't move his arm. And then,
Yeah.
See here. So where they had him in the guillotine, that was a real guillotine.
Oh,
he said it made him very nervous.
Yeah. Did they dull the blade at least, or what?
No. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered, but they
I know,
basically
but
say,
still,
we got it locked in. But he says, once you're locked in, you're in.
Huh. Wow.
Special effects, 1967.
The old Bray studio, is that where they filmed this? I read somewhere online this was the last of the Hammer movies to be filmed at a specific studio. Might have been the Bray studio.
I think they were filming 2 movies at the same time, so I'm not sure if it's technically the last or just in the last set of recordings. But yeah, this was the last one for the Bray studio. Some of the reviews I read, I found more reviews on this one, but some of them were really critical of the script. Some of them ignored all the script problems and said this is a really fun movie. Not a lot of middle ground, though.
That's too bad. I'm somewhere on the middle ground with this. They've clearly given up at continuity, but for better or worse. They're just making movies that they think is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for a made-for-TV movie, this would be great. Going to a theater and spending $20 in modern money, a little underwhelming.
Well, they had a double feature on those little spots, right? They had a mummy movie, Curse of the Mummy or something. Yeah. Shroud of the Mummy.
So I'm curious. I'm seeing on my wiki page that the UK version was 86 minutes, and the US version is 92 minutes.
Oh, huh.
See here, my Blu-ray is 92 minutes, so I'm getting the longer version.
My DVD, the Anchor Bay says 92 as well. And now that I think about it, they did have 20th Century Fox's name right at the end of the credits. So this is the American release.
Okay. So I am curious as to what the additional 6 minutes were. I know on the previous movie they had recorded a few extra things for the television versions. So I do kind of wonder if they recorded a scene or two to flesh that out.
It's probably the execution of the father somehow. You think that would have done it if they didn't have to bring all the actors back?
I think that scene's important.
They could always reference it without showing it.
Well, when they do the experiment where they show her the guillotine, I feel like that scene doesn't make a lot of sense without it.
Yeah, I just don't know what other candidate you'd use if you wanted to add something to this without bringing all the actors back together and the sets back together.
Yeah, well, if there's just one scene, I kind of wonder if the one with the jail, where Hertz, where Hertz secures the body. That's possible.
Could be. It's not like you have to have it, but again, he's the same guy has to deliver the body to the house as well. So I don't know.
Yeah. So this was not a successful movie. It needed to get 1.6 million in rentals to break even, and it made 1.59. So not a big loss, but they didn't make money on it.
Oh well. Best laid plans of mice and men.
I kind of wonder if that's why he wasn't or why Peter Cushing wasn't in the next one.
Oh, he is though. He's in. The next one is Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Then they do a reboot after that.
Oh, okay. I had those flipped then. Okay.
Yeah, I think Destroyed is 2 years after this one, So would that make it 69 or something like that? And then I think Horror of Frankenstein is 1970 is what I
Okay.
seem to remember.
For some reason I had those flipped. But okay.
Well, like I said, the world of Hammer does not mention Frankenstein must be destroyed, and Peter Cushing probably doesn't like to talk about it either. But maybe more on that next time.
We got any other thoughts on Frankenstein Created Woman?
Yeah, those dandies, I wanted them dead in a hurry. Like, just from the first moment, I guess it's a credit to those actors, all of whom are now deceased in real life, that they just made you hate them from the get-go. When they ask the innkeeper what he recommends, and he says, the white wine or the red wine, and he points to the white wine, and then they say, we'll have the red wine. They're just very good at making you want them dead even before they commit any crimes. So, there's something to that.
So should we rate this movie with dandies or cleavers?
Well, let's go for cleavers. So, we've had cleavers in the last 3 movies, and I'm going to give Revenge of Frankenstein the top cleaver award, whatever that is. And I'm going to let this movie, I'm going to put Woman edge out Evil of Frankenstein. So it gets more cleavers than Evil. I'm just not sure how many. Are we doing a 5 cleaver scale?
Sure.
So yeah, Revenge will get 5. This one may get 3. I'm going to give Evil 2.
What about Curse?
Well, there were no cleavers in that one. No cleaves.
Okay, good point.
They don't. But yeah.
So I'll give this one 3 out of 5 cleavers.
Yeah.
I wish that I wish that the last 30 minutes had been more like 45 to 50 minutes of the movie. Too much setup time.
It is. Most of the movie is set up, and a lot of that. It's the unfortunate thing in these movies. They pretty much tell you the setup in summary before you go see it. And yet they nevertheless devote most of the runtime to showing you what you've already been told you're going to see.
Yeah, it's a horror movie. I think they forget that sometimes. Like, we understand that you need to care about the characters, and you need to make, like, they're definitely prioritizing the relationship between Hans and Christina. But they kind of skip that at the beginning anyways. By the time we see them, they're already in love with each other. So then they spend another hour getting to the point where they die. Well, it's not like you're spending the hour really showing us how they came to fall in love. Like, they could have done the first hour in 30 minutes. So then you could have got 30 more minutes of possessed woman, and then maybe some of these plot points would make more sense.
I don't need to see their love story. That's okay. I'm good with as is. I would have been more interested to see more of Frankenstein's weird freeze yourself to death backstory.
Well, I guess what I really mean is that I would have liked to had a full hour of the dual souls in the body, and then maybe they could have used some dialogue to make a little bit more sense too.
A little bit of Christina looking in the mirror or something, and she talks back to herself in Hans's voice, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
That would have been good.
There's many ways you could do it, but yeah, the freezer scene, probably the best scene in the movie. The kills were pretty good, especially the second one. Nice lighting.
Yeah, we're not sure what she exactly did to Anton, the first of the dandies, because we don't. When she lures him into the house, we only see his reaction to after she says she's going to slip into something more comfortable. And the next thing we see is immediately cut away to the guillotine coming down, but it's public knowledge afterwards that Anton is dead. So we don't know what she did. Did she kill him and then haul him over to the guillotine and then behead him? Or
it makes you wonder if in post-production they just weren't liking what they saw.
Maybe it's more effective that way, not knowing, but It's odd the way they did it.
Yeah, I mean, you only got 3 kills, so if you're not going to show one of them, then it's a horror movie with one less kill. I don't know, but yeah, nah, good movie though. Not great, not bad. Made for TV, be a great movie. Underwhelming to go to the theater, but yeah.
Eh.
So next one, what's the next one we got? We got
Must
Frankenstein
be
must be
destroyed.
destroyed.
He's done too much. He needs to be destroyed.
Like God said, it's not a multiverse movie since we have all these different continuities of Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's interesting to imagine how many Peter Cushing, Victor Frankensteins there are running around in the Franken multiverse. Just all the different
They should
ones.
do this. They need the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing to each other.
Yeah, all in a circle, all the Victors pointing. And in this movie, he'd have to be wearing those gloves because he's got a hand arthritis or something.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that is creepy to think the actor actually had to stick his head in a guillotine. That, I wouldn't want to do that.
1967.
Woof.
Especially if you saw your daddy get his head cut off. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
I'm going to put a burger on the grill.